If you didn't know the score of this game, and I told you that UTSA had only 345 yards of offense and two interceptions compared to Colorado State's 407 yards of offense, no turnovers, and that they dominated the time of possession, would you have guessed that UTSA had won?
Atos, I'd say we made a trip to Colorado to see the team that lost much like East Carolina did last season when we went to Greenville.
Look, I said going into this preview that this game had some ECU vibes, so I get it. It wasn't pretty, but UTSA found a way to win. Are you ready to unpack the good, the bad, and the downright ugly?
I think so.
Let's get started.
All right. Well, this is episode 115 of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm the Toves, and I'm always joined by my wife, Atos. Atos, let's just start out. We actually made the trip up to Colorado. It was a nice trip. Flew into Denver, then drove to Fort Collins. Enjoyed nice little Friday night in Fort Collins, and then Saturday in the morning before the game, we drove up to Cheyenne, just so we could say we could go to Wyoming and cross that off our states list. So, beautiful part of the country. Though, Atos, if you had told me that the game was going to be the ugliest part of our trip, I would have maybe called you crazy because while I didn't think it was going to be the prettiest of games, I also didn't think it was going to be that ugly.
No, certainly we expected more offense. We both, I think, expected that at least one of the teams was going to score 30 points, and we didn't get close to that. So, yeah, it definitely was a stark contrast to the beauty of Fort Collins in general.
Well, and I think in our guesses, we figured maybe the defenses, because Colorado State might be too aggressive, we could get away with a few, which we did. But it wasn't very many of them. And then we didn't really have a lot of good drives. Colorado State looked lost coming off a bye. So it all just corresponded to just exactly what I had said in my prediction. And I hate sometimes when I'm right in the prediction, not because I can come on here and say I'm right, more because I thought it'd be more of a talking point to say, hey, this is what I really got wrong, right? And unfortunately, what I didn't get wrong is that two average teams playing just a sloppy game of football, Atos.
Yeah, I mean, this was certainly an absolutely undisciplined game on both sides. I mean, UTSA had 9 penalties, Colorado State had 11 penalties, and that doesn't even include all of the penalties that were declined or offsetting. It just killed any momentum either side had. I mean, it was just really hard for either one of these teams' offenses to get in a rhythm because it felt like every other play or every other drive, at least, there was a penalty of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It really hurt the flow of the game. It took 4 hours to complete. 4 hours? I mean, you would have thought that we were playing an air raid team and, we were passing on every single down. But even with the new clock rules, this still took 4 hours. And it was regulation. We didn't even get to overtime. Almost did, but we didn't. And 4 hours.
Yeah, at the end of the game, I really wanted to be excited because we won, but all I could feel was just relief. I mean, I literally just took a sigh of relief, like we escaped with a win. I didn't feel like the excitement that you would typically have for a win, especially for a road win because it's been so long.
Right. And I think it's just coming off a 2-point conversion. And let's divert ourselves to that Colorado State 2-point conversion because clearly that is the play that everybody's going to be talking about. That is the decisive play of the game. Colorado State is going to kick the extra point after scoring on UTSA's defense. And during that, Davin Martin off the left side of our defense comes off, jumps early, gets called for being offsides. I guess he was thinking that maybe he could get a hand on it if he just jumped the snap at the right time. And so that gives Jay Norvell a decision to make. Does he keep the extra point or does he accept the penalty and essentially have a 2-point try to win the game?
If I'm a Colorado State fan, I don't mind the fact that Jay Norvell went for it on the 2-point conversion attempt, because at that point in time, he seemed to have momentum on his side. They had just changed the quarterback. UTSA's defense is getting tired. I think I would be okay with the fact that he made that decision. Where I'd have an issue was with the play call for the quarterback he put in. I mean, I think if he used that play call and he had kept Bruce Owen, it would have been one thing. But he put in his backup quarterback, Taj Bullock, and it just didn't seem like the right play call for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to say that he should have kicked the extra point, because especially after you see the missed 2-point conversion. I should have kicked the extra point, right? Like, it's that's how us as fans will play it,
Yeah.
right? So I agree with you. I think it was the right time to go for the 2-point conversion. You got to like it. And let's be honest, as UTSA fans, we've been used to Jeff Traylor going for it at times.
Right.
And as fans, we love that. So anybody that's going to come and say, "Oh, no, you shouldn't have gone for a 2-point," you're lying, because you know that you like to go for it. You know that you want to see someone go for the win. Why do you want to play for the tie and go
Right.
for overtime? There's a lot of other factors there, but for me, I just would have liked a quicker play call. And what I mean by that is something where you make a decision quickly, whether it's a quick rub routes, and if the receivers aren't there, then you take off and run. But nothing that took a little bit too long to develop. And they rolled right, and the problem was they started running out of field, and it felt like Taj Bullock forgot just how much room he had left.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the kid's not a passer, but
Right.
let's be honest. This was going to be a tough call for Jay Norvell no matter what. Like, he's kind of
Sure.
in a bad position, right? Because you make the 2-point conversion, you're the hero. I mean, that would be the storyline. You're the genius, right? That you went for it, you had the guts to do it, you won the game. If you play it safe, you kick the extra point, or you keep the extra point that they had, and you go to overtime and you lose, then everyone's sitting there cursing him, saying, "Why wasn't he more aggressive?
Right.
You had UTSA on their
Right.
heels. Why didn't you go for it?" So, I mean, he was kind of in a no-win situation unless they executed. Then, again, he would be quite the hero. And, if it had been Jeff Traylor in that situation, I think he might have gone for the win at that point if the circumstances were changed, because he would have felt like, "Oh, I've got the hot hand with my quarterback." And that's kind of what Jay Norvell was saying. I just don't understand why he made the quarterback switch right there. But
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, look, you're right. And I think that was the important takeaway here, is that he did have the UTSA defense on his heels, because one thing that you cannot forget when you see that, and maybe you didn't catch it if you're watching on TV, but live, we came out of that sort of 2-point conversion timeout, and we had 12 men on the field. I mean, it'll be a recurring theme, but I don't understand how that happens. And to me, I think that really clinched why Jay Norvell went for it there.
yeah,
so.
because if we would have got caught with that 12th man on the field, if that kid hadn't gotten off right at the second he did, and they got a second attempt, I don't think we would be talking about a win right now. I think if they got a second attempt on that 2-point conversion, this would be a completely different podcast.
It may not be very much different. I mean, I think it's still going to be a tough one, but at the end of the day, it's just good to see that we figured out how to hold on and win this game. To your point, I think last year we probably would have lost this game, and maybe having that kind of can't win a road game monkey off their back, kind of helps move the team forward, especially since this is their first non-conference road win since 2022, when we were there at West Point watching them beat Army in overtime.
Yeah, it is just incredible to think about the fact that we haven't won a non-conference road win since September of 2022. That's just crazy. Hopefully the coaching staff, though, can take this bye week to gather their thoughts, get some kids healthy, make some adjustments, because we don't look ready right now for conference play. I think we need this bye week really badly to get some things in order before we head to Temple.
Well, it's coming up in a couple weeks, so let's get to breaking down this game. Let's start with their special teams, like we always do. Elliot Bro, Atos. It was an adventure, to say the least, with him back there as punt returner.
Yeah, you kind of feel bad for him. He's obviously been thrust into punt returning because there's been so many injuries in the wide receiver room that, they didn't want to put, Devin McEwen or David Amador out there. And you kind of got mixed results from him. You're going to hear a lot of criticism over the fact that he was fielding punts within the 10-yard line, but I would just remind you that we had the same feedback in the past about Sticks fielding punt returns and that same kind of yardage. And Jeff Traylor has said multiple times when he was talking about Sticks that that's what he wanted to do, that was the direction of the coaching. So I don't think you should look at those decisions and put all of the onus on Elliot Bro. I suspect that he was probably being coached to field those punts, just based on what we've seen in previous years.
Oh yeah, he was told to do that, and I think that's probably what bugs everybody so much. You can, like you said, you can get upset at Elliott, but really I think it's the coaching staff. And I talked about it last week with UIW. This coaching staff continues to let down these players, and why you would tell them to do this, I just don't know. But as you said, Traylor did bring that up a few times, and one of the things he did say was the fact that a lot of these punters can really pin you down around the 1 or 2 yard line. Well, you're still getting pinned. I mean, you're gonna tell me there's a difference really between the 2 yard line and the 4 yard line? Like I know it's 2 yards, but you're still in a terrible position offensively. So I don't understand the thinking, but hey, I'm not the one making a big salary coaching UTSA right now. So one other thing to bring up, though, is that first punt, which came off a quick kick from Colorado State. I asked quite a bit of people that I knew that probably know football much better than I do. And I was asking, just, does the defense get the same instruction as the special teams when there's a quick kick possibility? And one of the things, I don't remember if we brought this up during our preview, but you had noticed that one of the things Colorado State likes doing was a quick kick.
Yeah, they did this a couple of times, or at least twice, in the Washington game. So I don't think that our defense was surprised, which is why I think you saw Jamarius Lewis field that punt, and you saw him, running up the sideline, and we all thought that he should have had a touchdown there. Unfortunately, we had a penalty, but that's neither here nor there. But I think they were prepared for that scenario to happen because it has happened this season with Colorado State.
The only thing that I would counter here there, and I don't know that I'm countering, but I think maybe adding is probably a better word, is that when you see a quick kick, usually the defense will either stay away from the ball and allow the offense to, or the kicking team to down the ball, or they'll field it and call a fair catch. Mm-hmm. To me, it was clear that they had set up, as you said, he went down the sideline. He did it so smoothly that you knew, it looked like to me that they had prepared a scenario to really block for the sideline return. So I'm fine with that. I think it's just with a team that's really struggling, and this is a good play to maybe get them rolling. But on the other hand, it's also a play where you're going to probably see a block in the back. And that's what we saw, like you said. And I just think it was just a tough moment. But some of these times when Elliott fielded those punts, former UTSA special teams coordinator Tommy Perry, who's on the Colorado State sideline, was celebrating big time when he saw what they were doing. And
yeah, especially when he saw Elliott kind of muff one of the punt.
Yeah.
It was so frustrating because, you're seeing your former special teams coordinator over there celebrating our mistakes,
Yeah. It was a rough look, but you know what? We got the win, so let's talk about some good stuff that came out of this. Michael Petro?
Yeah, he got a career-long 40-yard field goal, and then in the post-game trailer commented that in that first drive where they went for it on 4th and 5, I believe, that he wishes he would have let Petro kick a field goal there. He said that, he really has earned Traylor's trust, which I think is, huge because going into this, we all know that Petro was not the first choice to be the field goal kicker. He was kind of the last man standing. So, I think it's good that you can hear Traylor saying, he's earned my trust. It'll be interesting to see if we see more field goals going forward versus, going forward on fourth down.
I mean, it felt like it could be a back-breaking offensive drive for UTSA, and to come out right out the gate and drive down the field. I get it. I'm not gonna question Jeff Traylor there. I think he made the right decision. But also remember, he did say at the beginning of the year, you're probably going to see us go for fourth down more often than not, than we have in the past. So, okay, so which one is it, right?
Yeah.
We'll get to some of those fourth down decisions later. But, yeah, it was, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate what he said about Petro, but I feel like he's still going to go for a fourth down.
Sure. We also saw, Cale Hogan get quite a bit of time and experience punting in this game. I think he had 6 punts. But, again, we've had questions about Cale Hogan and, how reliable he was going to be. He'll never be Lucas Dean. He'll never be Yanni Roustas. But we've seen him become much more consistent. And he averaged 44.5 yards on his 6 punts. He had 2 that were downed inside the 20. He had a long of 51 yards. So, I think to say that he is improving and continuing to develop, is a fair statement. And, I don't think we should be nervous when we see him out there punting, although certainly, that means lots of other issues for our offense when we see Cale Hogan out there.
It's like you always said. We love our punter, but we don't love him so much that we want to see him that much.
Right.
All right, let's get over to the defense. Hey, Tobes, I want to start out by just saying, let's be careful about this defensive performance. I'm not going to say that there weren't good moments, so that there weren't a lot of good individual performers, but this Colorado State offense was bad for about at least, 3 quarters, maybe like 3 quarters and 5 minutes until Jackson Brousseau comes in. I mean, it still put up yards. You said 407 on this UTSA defense. So, there was a lot of not necessarily UTSA stopping Colorado State all the time. It felt like there were many more times where Colorado State was stopping themselves.
I think, again, if you're a Colorado State fan and you're watching this game, you're not necessarily feeling like UTSA's defense was the star of the show. You're probably focusing more on the concerns that you have with Colorado State's offense.
Yeah.
Again, we have been concerned about how this defense was going to gel. We've had question marks about their performance in a couple of the games. But I think you got to give them some credit because they came up with the stops when they needed to. And like you mentioned, we did have some really good performances. But once again, I think the thing that showed up in this game that is a red flag and that needs to be talked about were the penalties. Because, again, you just saw so many penalties popping up. And on the defensive side, we've already talked about a couple of them, but, illegal substitution, 12 men on the field, those types of things are just not acceptable. And they're not so much on the players as much as they are on the coaching staff.
The first Colorado State touchdown, I looked over at you and said, we have 12 players on the field. And then they scored. And I was like, well, it doesn't matter. They're going to decline that penalty.
I know it was. And my response to you was 12 men on the field and we still couldn't stop them.
That's why I said let's just hold off on the defensive, the defensive performance, right? Because that wasn't the only time. There was another time. There was a few other times, and some of these were coming out of timeouts. And this is at least the third, maybe the fourth week, so the entire season, where Jess Lepp, as you mentioned, this coaching staff doesn't have good organization. Now, Jeff Traylor brought up noise and that they couldn't really hear themselves. Blah blah blah. You played at College Station. You played in the Alamo Dome during the Texas State game. I'll give you a break on UIW, but then you get to Colorado State. Colorado State was not as loud as those first 2 games.
No,
and
even with the cannon and allegedly the speaker, over by their bench, I mean, it's still, nowhere near as loud.
The cannon only fires when they score a touchdown. So I don't know what the cannon had to do with anything. It's just a distraction. It's just a look over there because I'm going to tell you something else, and I'm going to be doing, trying to like juggle something over here. And what he's juggling is Jessleb having some poor organization, and that, as you said, has to be addressed at some point because it's going to cost us games.
Right.
And we've seen it for at least, like I said, at least 3 weeks, if not maybe 4 weeks in a row. So this is on Jessleb, and yeah, it's got to be fixed.
Yeah, I think the other big thing was just watching Colorado State make their quarterback change. And first of all, just for those of you who were watching this on television, you can't really hear it on TV, but Colorado State was booing their quarterback.
Yeah.
And it was very clear that they were not loving his performance. You could already see this lack of confidence from him and his decision making. And then you had to kind of feel for the kid that you have the entire crowd, which by the time they started booing was mostly adults, but there were still some students in there booing as well.
Well, yeah, the students started a "take him out" chant.
Yeah.
And I think it was in the third quarter. And that's when I felt terrible for him because it's like, and I was just hoping that Jay Norvell would just take him out because it's like, it's not about appeasing the fans so much. It was just like, whatever's left of his confidence is gone.
Right.
And you could tell by the play, like you said, especially in the third quarter, they cannot move the ball whatsoever. Like they have so much trouble moving the ball, and they had UTSA on their heels, and they could not do anything. And again, it really came down to the fact that once Jackson Brousseau came in, the biggest difference between him and Nicolosi was that he was much more decisive.
Mm-hmm.
Against this average UTSA defense, like all you really have to do is just be decisive. That's how Brad Jackson was against Texas State in the Texas State game, right? So it also leads to the fact that this UTSA defense, for as good a performance, just can't create any turnovers. I mean, we got a pass rush, a little bit of one, but no turnovers.
Yeah, and I think again the biggest issue for me was once Jackson Brousseau goes into the game, you could see that we weren't really adjusting well to him. All of a sudden, the crowd's in the game. They're excited.
Well, and I think, like I said, it comes down to the fact that Brousseau was making quicker decisions than Nicolosi. And maybe you could make a case that if Brousseau was in there earlier, that he could have made a difference. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case because this defense, was coming up with some big plays at times, especially Nana. Nana over here is got to be the star because of this defense because of the fact that he's providing everything that we've not really had the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the fact that we really haven't had a pass rush, and he posts 5 tackles, 4 for a loss, 3 sacks, and a pass breakup. He's only the 6th Roadrunner in school history to have 4 or more tackles for loss in a game. That's crazy. The last time that happened was Jamori Robinson in the Temple game last year. He's also only the 7th Roadrunner to have 3 or more sacks in a game. Again, the last time that happened was Jamori Robinson last year in Temple. So for him to come in and just play lights out was really, really impressive.
He looked like a special player when we first saw him early in the 2023 season. And especially when he went down in that game, I was like, boy, you're losing like what looked like a dynamic player. Mm-hmm. Now, he's still got some things to work on. And I think the worst part about this is the fact that in 2023, there was depth. So, you could get away with potentially like just having him on the field for maybe 10 to 15 snaps. And you'd be like, he's going to give that offense hell for 10 to 15 snaps. Now, like you said, they're trying to get him up to speed here, but you're probably going to need him on 90% of the snaps for defense. Like right. It's just him coming off is going to be difficult for this defense to swallow. So now hopefully with his presence and he continues this play, double teams are going to start coming. And so that should help free up some things defensively. But I mean, that's the hope, right? If he struggles against some of these offensive lines, maybe are a little bit better, offenses start trying to game plan a little bit for him, then that changes the narrative or at least the scope for this defense.
Yeah, and believe me, when he went down, I held my breath because I thought, oh no.
Wow, yeah, because he was just on the face down, so that was tough to
Yeah,
see.
he just had an awesome play. He's face down. It was really one of those moments where, you're just holding your breath that he's okay. And so to see him get back up, to jog off the field, and then ultimately to come back later in the game was great because, I think everyone was hoping that he was going to be okay because, again, you've seen the spark that he has offered to this defense, and you want to see him have a healthy season after what he's gone through these last 2 years.
It was eerily similar to me to the JT. With
Yeah.
JT last year, you saw the injury and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
With Nana, I didn't see anything, but you still kind of, to your point, it was still like, man, he just came back from this long absence. Like, this can't be happening, right?
Right.
But I mean, look, for everything we're talking about, Nana, he receives American Conference Honorable Mention Player of the Week. He obviously deserves it because, he had a very good performance against his Colorado State team. Like I said, there were some really good individual performances. We could go through more of them, but I think Nana, was the biggest one. I mean, obviously, I think we're always going to talk about. There's a couple of players on the offense and defense that we'll always talk about. So we'll talk about one of them right now, Shad Banks. Once again, just playing lights out at linebacker. I mean, there are moments when I think I just count the lucky stars that you have a Shad Banks on defense.
Yeah, absolutely. He looks every bit the part of, that leader on defense, number 0.
Yeah, yeah. So again, he's one of two players. We'll mention the second player here in a little bit as we get into the offense. Atos, I think it's safe to say that this UTSA team is not playing complementary football. Obviously we saw it. You've mentioned it, quite a bit during the defensive segment where, we talked a lot about the Colorado State offense, but I think it was just how much they were getting frustrated by that defense. But the defense was held on the field way too long, and that's what I mean here about the complementary. You want your offense, and we thought the offense was going to be a little more ball control because of the fact that we knew that the defense was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And even in some of our better seasons in the trailer era, it's been more of a ball control offense, not one that's all about big strikes. So as fun as it is to see Robert Henry bust a 70-yarder, whether it's through the air or, well, I should say now through the air, or on the ground, it can lead to issues because you're getting your defense back out on the field. So a couple things I want to talk about here, Atovs. First thing is, I mentioned it in previous weeks, but because UTSA doesn't have the high-level athletes at receiver that we used to have, even you could make a case at running back, the depth of that, this UTSA offense has struggled on third and fourth down. You have more average players, and because you have more average players, going for it on fourth down and even trying to convert on third down has become very difficult. In the trailer era, you had in this first 2 years 44%, 43% on third down conversions. 2022, 2023 is 48% both years, but then starting last year it drops down to 40%, and now it's at 37% within the first 4 games here. The non-conference season is actually worse than last season in non-conference, and we thought last season coming out of non-conference was bad.
Right.
Fourth down, we've been in the 50s almost the entire time. So more than half of our fourth down conversions have normally been converted. But then you get into last season, it was 36%. And then this season is 30%. Last season, during non-conference, we were like 55% at fourth down conversion. So we thought it was great. And then we got into conference and then we pooped the bed and we could not convert a fourth down. So the reason I'm bringing these numbers up is because you're seeing now the problem of how do you scheme conversions. Now it's no longer about out athleting a team. It's about having to be a little more detail oriented and figuring out how to get guys open. This is the first time in the Jeff Traylor era that UTSA's offense never made a trip to the red zone. Every single game they've made a trip to the red zone except for this one. That's the first time since November 18th, 2018 against Marshall. That's right. The Frank Wilson era.
Yeah, and there was a point during this game where I looked at you and I said, I feel like Traylor is channeling Frank Wilson because it felt like a Frank Wilson 2018 game, where we're going to try to slug it out and win 10-3.
Yeah. It was, I mean, it was tough to watch. I mean, obviously there's a lot of reasons that we're going to go through here. But I will bring up once again, Atoves, at the end of fall camp, I had said that last scrimmage, the offense doesn't look very good. And I thought, well, we'll see if that's an indication. I'll come back to it. But I think now, after 4 non-conference games, I think it's time to come back to it. I mean, this offense has just not looked very good. And one of the first questions I think you're thinking about is Owen injured?
Yeah, I mean, 2 things. One, in the game, you saw him, look at his hand at one point. I think they said he maybe hit it on his helmet or something. I didn't see exactly what happened even on the replay, but I saw him kind of looking at his hand and flexing it. And then you also saw him grabbing at his ribs at one point right before the interception. He'd gotten hit, and then he's kind of grabbing his side. So, I don't know if something happened earlier and those things kind of compounded this injury, because he seemed okay in the first quarter, but something's just been off with Owen. And, I don't know if it's an injury that Traylor's just not willing to tell us about. Maybe it's something minor, that's just kind of nagging. But there's just something off with him, and then there's something off with him and his receivers. And in post-game, Traylor talked about all these wide receiver injuries and how we've got to get them healthy. He mentioned that they weren't practicing, which could give us some indication of why perhaps there isn't this chemistry between the wide receivers and Owen that we would expect. But frankly, most of these people that we're talking about are veterans that are returning, or at least were here last year and are returning. So you would expect that even if they're not practicing at the beginning of the season or right now, they'd still have that kind of chemistry with Owen, because there were times, in the past when JT or Josh or somebody might get hurt and they may not practice, or, Traylor would be pretty light on them in practice, knowing that they could kind of put it together in the game. We're just not seeing that happen. So I don't know if it's kind of a culmination of a lot of different things. They're not scheming to get open. They're, suffering from the fact that they're not practicing. There's a chemistry issue with Owen. Owen's injured. I don't know what it is, or maybe it's a little bit of everything, but something is just off with this offense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I told you is every year can't be a blank sheet of paper on offense. There's got to be a continuation of what you had built upon the year before, especially when you had this many returners. Mm-hmm. I could understand last season when you didn't have all the returning starters, but I still didn't quite understand it because Owen McCown now is in his 3rd season with Justin Burke. Mm-hmm. At this point, Justin Burke should know the ins and outs of Owen. And there was a point this summer where they had this film session where they brought up, oh, look, you made this play, and what were you thinking there? And so Owen just kind of walked through a little bit. Seems like they have a good rapport, but that's up to Justin Burke to get him comfortable. And that's exactly what you saw with Barry Lunny and with Will Stein. Barry Lunny built upon that first season, that COVID season. He built upon what they had started on offense. And then you saw the offense come in against Illinois at the beginning of the 2021 season. They weren't missing a beat. Mm-hmm. They looked better than they had the year before. And it just kept churning the entire season. And then you go to 2022 and Will Stein builds upon what Barry Lunny had. And I mean, obviously that was peak Frank, but you also had the triplets, but in 2022, you didn't have a big time running back threat. Mm-hmm. You forget that we had Brendan Brady, but he was a beat up version of Brendan Brady. He had already quote unquote retired, and then he came out of retirement to come play. So certainly there were a lot more limitations then. And so it's just weird that with Justin Burke, it has not been building upon. And this is why you have slow starts to me. Yet Jeff Traylor can't figure out how to get this going. And he doesn't want to call out Justin Burke. He doesn't want to say anything. And of course, anybody listening here is probably going to say, oh, he's the problem. To an extent, I think he is. But I also think that you have to figure out how to put your players in the best position. Last year, we saw the tight ends. The tight ends were everything. Mm-hmm. And they didn't get worse. We saw them in fall camp. They look good. They look so good that we were like, we're not going to talk about them because they're not an area of concern. They look great, but they've disappeared. Like
Right.
they're just not part of this offense. And I can't believe that it's David Amador has taken that many snaps or looks away from the tight ends. But even to that, one of the things we talked about or was talked about for the UIW game was that Jeff Traylor wanted to see Owen go through his progressions against UIW. In this game, it never felt like Owen was really going through his progressions. He wasn't really looking for that second or third or fourth receiver. It looks like he was getting stuck on the first option, maybe even going to the second option, but he was just stuck at the very beginning. Some of it was he wasn't getting enough time at times because Colorado State was just outright blitzing him. Like I said, they wanted to dare Owen to beat him deep, and he couldn't. And the receivers weren't getting open. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff happening in the passing game that I think is quite a bit of concern, and Traylor will say it. So to me, I think the weirdest part of this is the fact that you've got an offensive line that's playing great, better than we've seen them
Right.
maybe during the entire Traylor era. You've got a running back that's getting historic numbers over here, not just UTSA wise, but the fact that he's leading the nation. So what's wrong with the passing game? Like, how can you not come up with a good passing game off of that strong running game? I also thought it was kind of interesting after I get off this soapbox rant of mine, but Tyson Summers, the defensive coordinator for Colorado State, had said, if we get 9 knockouts in a game, then we're going to win that game. And then a knockout is essentially a stop, right? They got 9 of them, but they don't win the game. So that just tells you the margin that Tyson Summers was playing with in this, where he says, this is our goal. We hit our goal and we still didn't win. Like that's got to be a tough one. But that's also, we have to talk about again a little bit of the offensive line. I said they played really well. I mean, they held up against incessant blitzing after a while. I mean, honestly, there should have been at least 4 or 5 defenders running at Owen at some point, because I thought that this offensive line just could not, because the playmakers weren't making any plays. It felt like there was 12 guys on the field for Colorado State, and they were just sending extra defenders at the offensive line.
Yeah. And again, they were playing really well. And I don't think most people even really noticed that Jalen Garth got hurt in the first half of the game. I noticed it because we were there live and I saw him walking off the field and going under the tunnel. But DeAndre Marshall came in and he played well. I mean, you weren't seeing any drop off, or, again, had there been a drop off, it would have been obvious that Jalen Garth had been injured. But a lot of people watching the game didn't really realize that had even happened, because he came in and he held his own.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it shows just how well the offensive line is playing, and just a little bit more of the depth, right? And let's be very clear here. In the past, we've had walk-ons playing at tackle with Frank Harris in at quarterback, and we were like, man, we're going to play Texas with a walk-on tackle, and we still held our own. You can't tell me that DeAndre Marshall coming in, yes, there's going to be a bit of a drop-off from maybe Jalen Garth because he doesn't have mobility or maybe some of the skills that Jalen has, but you can't tell me that we can't survive without Jalen Garth. I mean, obviously, we don't want him out for a long period of time, but you can't say that, DeAndre is such a liability that, it's going to be a problem. So, I mean, look, we've got a really good offensive line. Well, obviously, we need some production from, the skill makers, but we really need some things from, Justin Burke, and maybe getting some ways to get some of these guys open, or at least fix Owen McCown. I said there was 2 guys that we always are going to talk about because they just seem to be the guys on either offense or defense. And for offense, it's Robert Henry.
Yeah. You have Robert Henry with 2 touchdowns, our only 2 touchdowns of the game. One comes off of a 74-yard reception, the other off of a 76-yard run. Just incredible. I mean, I almost don't think he can score if it's anything less than 70 yards. But I do want to point out one little fun fact. We are now 2-0 when Robert Henry has a hair tie versus tape. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I think he needs to continue to keep his hair up. Just a little side note. But again, being serious, he is the first UTSA player to rush for 100 or more yards in 6 consecutive games. And he received the American Conference Honorable Mention Player of the Week. Honestly, he is the MVP of our offense right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much more you can say about the guy, especially since we've talked about him and gushed about him for the last, I guess now 4 weeks. But you also got to be able to say that he had been doing a lot of trash talking or whatever, and he's feeling pretty good about himself over the last few weeks. It was interesting to see after his touchdowns that he just went and handed the ball over to the refs instead of, talking trash to defenders or anything like that. It was just hand the ball over, and a little growth there, and maybe just something that hopefully this offense can continue growing with.
All right, let's pivot and talk about a team, the UTSA women's soccer team, that is on an absolute hot streak. They are off to one of the best starts in conference play in the Pittman era. It's the first time since 2022 that UTSA has won 4 straight games. That the last time that happened was when we beat North Texas en route to the Conference USA Tournament Championship. Just incredible performance from these ladies. We've talked about it week over week. And then, once again, you have a big rivalry game against North Texas, and we came out with a victory.
Yeah, I think the ceiling's a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. And that's a good thing. I mean, I thought that they played really well in the first half, and then the second half they kind of came back down to earth a little bit, but it still, yeah, I think it was a great performance. So let's talk about the good, bad, and ugly. Let's start out the ugly. This really had nothing to do with, I think, the teams overall, except for the fact that post-game discussion between UNT head coach John Hedlund and Coach Derek Pittman seemed to be a little, I'm going to say heated, but it just seemed to be a little back and forth. There was an extra kind of squeezing of the hands as they were like doing the handshake, and it was just a long discussion. So it seemed like from Hedlund's point of view, he was pointing to the referees at the sidelines a bit. And so not sure what that was all about. I'm sure Coach Pittman would never tell us. I'm pretty sure he was just saying we were just exchanging, brisket recipes. But I would say this: it doesn't seem like they're going to be sending Christmas cards to each other anytime soon.
No, it certainly felt like something we would have seen between Seth Luttrell and Coach Traylor back in the Conference USA days.
Yeah, I mean, what it really came down to is just we've talked about some of these rivalries and maybe some of these organic ones that come up between the coaches, and I think this one is one. John Hedlund, I think, has been a little spicy because I think, to your point, when it was Traylor and Luttrell, Traylor seemed to kind of come up and just smack, Luttrell around a little bit, and it feels like Hedlund probably smacked Pittman around for a little while. Now, Pittman is, over the last couple of seasons, has really taken it to North Texas, so it'll be interesting to see how this thing progresses. But I would say, too, North Texas doesn't quite look as strong as it has, and maybe that's just because of what Pittman has done with the UTSA soccer team. He's brought in a lot of talented players, and I think that has probably maybe chipped away at some of the things that John Hedlund had taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. So let's get over to the bad. I'm not sure it's a bad thing, but I still think that Ava Jackson, our forward, needs to be receiving passes on runs towards the goal instead of consistently chasing the long balls or just being used to hold up the ball. I think it worked last season for Jordan Walker. She wasn't as skilled as Ava Jackson was, but I think it's just an evolution of play. And so let me get to the good stuff, because that first half attacking, I already kind of mentioned, was just stellar. There were no goals, but UTSA was relentless on their offensive attack, and they were playing so well. And so I made a mention to you in that game. I said, hey, remember what I said, about Coach Pittman and the UTSA soccer team? Like, one of the things I like is possession football. Mm-hmm. And, they need to have a little bit more possession. They need to move the ball around a little bit more. It's exactly what they did. And I think that's what fits some of these players a little bit more. And I think it's an evolution for Coach Pittman. But, I was like, I told you, I think he had to have listened, because I was like, they wouldn't have come out like this if that's not what it was. But in all seriousness, I mean, it fits what they do best. And Emily Ekman and Brooklyn Bailey just seem to be so in sync. I mean, Ekman was really feeling herself. Like we talk about Robert Henry feeling himself. Emily Ekman was out there with the ball, and it looked like it was just her by herself out there. She was easily moving around with the soccer ball. She was making some really nice passes. She was setting up her teammates in really nice ways. And I think we finally unleashed Emily Ekman a little bit more. I don't think she's really a winger or she'll be playing up top. And that's really where Coach Pittman had her. Instead, he put her back in midfield, and she was a totally different player. So maybe that's something to watch out for in the future. I think that's exactly her natural position. But her and BB just seems to have a different energy when Emily's serving her. And she had this really nice service. And we had put up a clip on, our socials that you took of Emily putting it there to BB. And BB she controls the ball, and then she makes a quick turn and then unleashes a left-footed shot, I should say, to the left side of the goal. And that's the type of stuff that you want to see from your forwards. And that's exactly what I love seeing right away. And I knew that things were going to be a little bit different this game. But, let's talk real quick about Izzy Lane, though. She comes off and she gets the game-winning goal. Now, it comes off some pressure late in the game. I don't know what North Texas was thinking, but they seem very casual. They do their goal kick, and they just kind of do a casual pass to one of the defenders. And defender she passes it between two of her North Texas teammates, and it just kind of ends up at the feet of UTSA. And so then it gets over to Izzy Lane, and Izzy, I thought she took a shot from too far outside, but she hit it hard enough, and it bounced to the point where it's a very difficult shot for a goalie to defend. And it was a game winner. So
yeah, it was interesting listening to her in the press conference on Monday because, she said, I really thought we were going to end up in a draw with North Texas. And, that's kind of, I think, where everybody was at that point because we were getting pretty late in the game. But she said she heard their assistant coach, Rob McGann, on the sideline yell out, "Find a way to win." And she said that really just kind of sparked her. And when she took that kick, you talked about how far out she was. She said she didn't realize that she was that far out. It wasn't really until she watched it on film that she realized how far away she actually was. You could see the intensity in that moment. And, it all kind of ties back to her hearing, again, Coach McGann yell out, "Find a way to win." And she sure did it.
Yeah, like I said, hell of a shot. I mean, that's just, it's one of those shots that I remember taking before when I played, and I wish I could strike it as well as she did, because I never struck it as well as she did. Mine would always hit the post. So, that's the big difference there between me and Izzy is that she hit the net, I hit the post. So one other thing I want to mention was Cam Closa. I've always talked about the fact that she doesn't lose any aerial battles, and we were kind of talking with our friend Joe at the game, and we talked about, you got mossed, right? And those segments for the NFL players when, they just out jump a defender and score. So he proposed, and I agree with him. Just, you got close it whenever she wins an aerial battle. I think it's certainly, I don't know what it is about her. She just seems to always win the aerial battle. She's just really good in the air. And I think what throws me off is that she's so casual about it. Like if you've got a really good skill, usually you show it off a lot. Mm-hmm. She's just so casual the way she goes up, and then she just gets up. I mean, it's just, just a unbelievable skill, and obviously why she's a D1 athlete, right? And why I never was a D1 athlete. Like, I'm just jealous of the fact that she's just so good at doing that, because I always thought I could be that good, and I never ended up that good.
Well, obviously somebody agrees with you, because she was named the Defensive Player of the Week for the American Conference this week.
Stellar performance. I mean, she continues to be just a linchpin there in the middle. And her sister was definitely a linchpin for us in the CUSA days. Now she's the linchpin in the American Conference days. So just really good to see.
Izzy Lane and Jasmine Kessler were also named honorable mention players of the week this week for their play in the North Texas game.
Yeah, I mean, good performances. I mean, I think Jasmine, it was that scramble late in the game. She makes one save, and then it's just North Texas is just going all out. and it felt like it felt like we were just dropping to the ground or doing whatever to cover up anything to get to Jasmine Kessler, and we put up as much of a human barrier that you can put up to just stop any of those shots, which just really good play from UTSA, and it's why they're 2-0 in conference now. They're 2-2 overall, which means they sit atop American Conference standings. Technically, they're tied for first with South Florida, but because we have the better overall record, UTSA is number one in conference. And Atos, I think if you would have told me before the season that they were going to be number one at this point, I would have said, wow, they must have had a heck of a run up to there, because I would not have guessed that they would have beaten North Texas. I thought it was probably going to be a draw. I thought there was a couple of other games that maybe we're gonna test them, especially if they go on road trips, and they're gonna start some of that here in a little bit. But certainly they've played really well, and I think have earned the number one spot at this point, and hopefully they continue to pad this. All right, well, and it starts on Thursday against UAB. They're sixth in conference. They've tied both their matches in conference, so they're 0-2, and then they're 3-2-5 overall. They've got 18 goals for, 10 goals against. This is a tough team, Tobes. They beat us last season at Park West 2-1. They won on a penalty kick. And then they went up to this season. They went to Memphis. Memphis was ranked number 9 and tied them 1-1 there. So very tough team. They're very good at looking for a great shot. They're not going to just randomly take shots. They're going to take very good shots, and they're always going to make sure that those shots are on goal, which makes them really dangerous. I would say their key player is their midfielder, Abby Burns. She's got 3 assists, but she's the one that scored the game-winning penalty kick at Park West last season. I believe she's Australian. I was looking her up as I was cringing as she went up to take that penalty kick. But they've got like 3 really good forwards. They've got Avery Berryman, who's got 3 goals, 2 assists. She leads UAB with 21 shots overall. Layla Stewart has 2 goals, 2 assists. She leads UAB with 11 shots on goal, and I think she's got 15 shots overall. So you see that only 4 of her shots have gone astray away from the goal, and that's the type of accuracy that this UAB team has. And then you got Jet Zimmer. She's got 3 goals, 3 assists. One of the things I think about Jet Zimmer is the fact that I think she was on the the conference watch list. So it makes sense that she's got so many goals and assists. She's a playmaker. One other one to watch out for is defensive woman, Louise Larson. She's definitely one of the linchpins back there, and somebody that our attacker's going to watch out for. Sunday, we're back at Park West, so it's going to be interesting to see. It's been a while since they've had Thursday, Sunday games, and they're going to go out to Birmingham, and then they're going to travel back to Park West. So we'll see how we're able to deal with that travel. But we take on Charlotte at noon Central on Sunday, 8th in conference at 0-1 and 4-4 overall. They've scored 10 goals and allowed 11. The Charlotte team's okay. I would say that one of the big players to watch is the midfielder Amelia Brown. She's got 2 goals. She's tied with 3 others with 2 goals. She's been on the conference watch list, so she's definitely somebody to watch out for. You've got a couple of the players. I would just point out Megan Bradley, their forward. She's got 2 goals, 3 assists. She leads the team in assists, and obviously is co-leading in goals. She's certainly a player that they're going to have to lock down on. I would say the best result from these 2 games would be to get a win against Charlotte and then a tie against UAB. I think that would be a fair expectation. Obviously, you would love to get both as wins, but it'd be hard for me to imagine there's going to be a loss in there.
All right, before we go, let's talk about some of the other football games that happened this weekend in the American Conference. We had another big win over a P4 team. Memphis beat Arkansas 32-31.
The Sam Pittman watch as Arkansas head coach is on. And for any of those interested, while Jeff Traylor's name may come up, I don't think that's a name they're going to go for, just because of the fact that he was there before and things didn't go well. Now, he wasn't the reason, but it's just a reminder of, the coach that didn't work out, right?
North Texas played their first conference game and beat Army in overtime 45-38.
North Texas is looking good, but let's be cautious here because North Texas was up, I think, at least 21-7, if not 28-7 on Army, and they allowed Army to come back. So this isn't by any means the old North Texas, but there's still flashes of, not the dominant team that everybody I think is making out at this point.
Yeah, and part of the reason that Army was able to come back is they ended up bringing their starting quarterback back into the game, and he kind of helped to propel them back to a comeback. They had started with Cade Helms, who had been playing, since Dwayne Coleman went out in the Tarleton game, but Dwayne, I guess, is healthy enough, so he was able to come back and really was able to spark Army into a comeback, almost comeback victory. And then the big news, of course, that everyone's been talking about: Tulsa beat Oklahoma State 19-12 at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and now it's cost Mike Gundy his job, and Jeff Traylor's name is going to be put out there, but I think at this point, I don't know if they're going to want to go for a Jeff Traylor. And the reason I say that is because Gundy and Traylor are the same age, and you're going to go for a similar coach. Like, you're probably going to try to find somebody that's different than what you had, right? Like, you don't want to keep going down the same type of coach. So I would imagine GJ is probably going to be one that's going to be brought up. It would suck to lose GJ at Texas State. And I say this because I'm more of a competitor and would love to see him continue to do what he's doing at Texas State and help to elevate UTSA if UTSA can elevate to that.
Yeah, I think, again, one of the criticisms of Mike Gundy has been that he was so unwilling to change and adapt to NIL and the transfer portal and everything that's kind of happening right now in college football. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they went for a younger head coach, somebody that's more in tune with all of the new things and factors that are really impacting football right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Rice also played a conference game and beat Charlotte 28-17. I think they're looking like a much better, a much more improved Rice than we've seen in the last couple of years.
And to say that, Rice beat us last season in Houston. So, yes, they come to the Dome, but I don't know that the Dome has the same ring to it since we lost to Texas State. So, obviously they believe that there's a mystique to it, but, anything can happen. I think Rice just looks better coached. And I mean, that's all I was thinking about when, we always talk about Bloomgren and his staff. It's like Bloomgren had a good idea, but just could not coach that team well, and they would always fall apart. So let's see what happens here.
Yeah, and looking ahead to Temple, which we'll, preview next week, they lost to number 18 Georgia Tech 24-45.
They're a much better coach team as well. Let's not misstate anything here. They look better coached. Now they just run out of players is what it is. There's only so much you can do, right? You can coach up a lot of, especially in your first season, you can coach up some players, but there's always going to be that margin of error is just so thin right now for Temple that they just can't make mistakes, and it's going to happen.
One of the other things that came out this week was that the NCAA changed the transfer window. So there will only be one transfer window in January. It was interesting because when Traylor was asked about that, he said he plans to have a spring game this year. So clearly the spring game was definitely tied to the transfer portal last year, and one of the reasons why, he didn't have that. But he also said he anticipated that a lot of teams that didn't have a spring game last year would bring theirs back.
Paranoia, right? Like, I mean, here's the deal. Like, you're potentially going to lose players, but that's not always going to be a bad thing. I think this idea that you're going to just lose all your good players on the G6 level is silly. You're not going to lose all your players. I mean, especially if they really like you and they think it's worth putting time and effort to stay at this level, they're going to stay. And that's what's happened during the Jeff Traylor era. It's just that whenever somebody leaves, the sky crashes down on Jeff Traylor and he freaks out. So, whatever.
All right. Well, I think we've covered just about everything this week. Thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atoves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon with more soccer coverage and to preview our game against Temple.
Birds up.